Good evening and welcome to the LaRouche Organization Friday Symposium. I'm Diane, president of the LaRouche Organization, and today is May 2nd. We are one short week from the celebration of VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, celebrated in Russia on May 8th, and I'm happy to report that President Trump has announced that the U.S. will observe this day, May 9th in Russia, and the U.S. will observe it on May 8th. And that is a welcome change. For the last number of years, it has been very hard to celebrate victory over fascism in Europe because so many fools in our Congress, and particularly in the White House, have been siding with the neo-Nazi regime in Ukraine. And although we did lose 400,000 lives in World War II, somehow there was not much enthusiasm for celebrating the defeat of Adolf Hitler, which, for the record, I would like to say was a very good thing indeed. And I wish that the world would uphold the standard of never again. Now, in preparation for their celebrations, President Putin has organized a 3-day education marathon, which happened from April 30th, I guess, through today. And it was held in major cities all over Russia. It involved 10,000 students in person and 10 million virtually. And I just wanted to share a few photographs from this. There you can see President Putin addressing a group of young people. Next, there's a young person asking a question at the meeting. Next, and there he is surrounded by a group of young people. And I'll just say that the opening day was addressed by the Russian Prime Minister, Mishustin, who actually spoke, interestingly, for tonight's topic, on the industrial production of the Soviet Union during the time of World War II, specifically not only the development of nuclear weapons, but that the Russians built the first nuclear power plant, of which he was quite proud. And I imagine the students listening were quite proud as well. Some friends of the LaRouche movement, Ray McGovern in particular, was there, along with film producer Oliver Stone, and they were both very, very warmly received as sane and peace-loving Americans. Ray in particular recited a Russian poem in Russian from memory on the horrors of war and received a standing ovation from thousands of young people. Now, in contradistinction to the idea of never again, the British, the French, and certain neocon and pro-Zionist elements in the United States are doing everything they can to sabotage and undermine the peace process. So we have this dubious minerals deal with Ukraine. It's not really clear the significance of it. I will say that I agree with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who in a post today said that Americans, she said, I am the base, I know the base. Americans did not vote for you, President Trump, to have soldiers occupying mineral fields in Ukraine. We don't want this. We want to develop our own resources in the United States. She further said, we don't want a war with Iran at the behest of another power other than our own. I presume she meant Israel, although she didn't say that. It might as well have been Israel or the British intelligence agencies, which are sort of one and the same thing. And that's the other area of danger. Trump posted yesterday on Truth Social that no one should trade with Iran whatsoever, and any nations that do will be slapped with secondary sanctions. Well, Russia and China have major trading deals with Iran, so I don't know how well that's going to go over. And then Secretary of State Marco Rubio seemed to be moving the goalposts from what Steve Witkoff negotiated earlier, or was working on with Iran, that they would still have an ability to refine their uranium for electricity Rubio said that no nation that doesn't have nuclear weapons is doing their own enrichment. That is simply not true. But it would be an unacceptable condition for Iran. And there's speculation that Donald Trump changed his position after Bibi Netanyahu's visit or phone call. Again, I'm not sure about any of this. I think we have to watch it. And then finally, you have right on cue a flare up between India and Pakistan, where 26 tourists were killed in the India controlled region of Kashmir. And India was quick to blame Pakistan, even though the government of Pakistan said they didn't do it. India then cut off water to Pakistan. The Pakistan Minister of Information warned that he expected a military strike from India within hours. That so far has not happened, but it's very tense. And I'm sure China and Russia are working closely to try and chill out that situation. And I do think you really have to look at the British again, because they've had a hand in this region. So you have some very desperate forces, as Helga LaRouche has stressed, not even nation states or governments, but financial interests who do not want peace to succeed. Now, finally, before I introduce my two guests, who are long-standing friends and associates of mine and my husband, let me just share a report that came from France, which everyone with children and grandchildren should pay attention to. French medical experts have sent an open letter to the French government warning against exposing children under the age of 6 to screens, that is television, tablets, cell phones, video games, etc. And these experts come from leading health institutions in France in pediatrics, public health, ophthalmology, child and adolescent psychiatry, and health and environment. The letter says in part, quote, neither the screen technology nor its content, including so-called educational content, are adapted to a small developing brain. Children are not miniature adults. Their needs are different needs. Screens, in whatever form, do not meet children's needs. Worse, they hinder and alter brain development, causing a lasting alteration to children's health and intellectual capabilities. And they said that the kinds of problems that are observed from children who are exposed to screens, even in very, very small amounts of time, are delayed language development, attention deficit, memory problems, and motor agitation. I can't help but wonder if some of the massive explosion of autism that we're seeing in the United States might not be caused in part by exposure to these screens. And they recommend that a healthy childhood should include things like reading aloud, free play, board games or outdoor games, physical, creative, and artistic activities. I was reflecting how fortunate I was to grow up without a cell phone, and we actually had to ride our bikes and meet our friends and do things outdoors. And I don't know how anyone ever met at the right place without a cell phone, but we somehow managed to do it. I guess you had to plan things in advance. And my parents didn't worry if I disappeared with my best friend for 8 or 10 hours at a time to go fishing. Imagine that. So we need to get back to that kind of world. But let me now introduce our guests, Roger and Denise Ham, who are going to be speaking with us about a wonderful Polish-French female scientist, although she worked with her husband closely for many years, Marie Sklodowska Curie. So welcome to both of you, and please go ahead.
Thank you.
Hi, Diane.
Hi.
I'm going to start off. I was really struck by this report from these various French organizations about the harmful effects of screen time. And I think it's very important as far as it goes, but it doesn't really address what should students be studying? What should they be learning to develop their intellectual and moral character? And Lyndon LaRouche often told us that the thing which uniquely distinguished the human species from every other species wasn't our opposable thumbs or our use of tools, however important that is, but our unique ability to discover and apply new physical principles. And the study of Marie Curie and Pierre Curie and all of their work is a wonderful, wonderful example of perhaps the most profound new physical principle ever discovered. I don't know, you can decide for yourself. But that's our goal. And Lyndon used to also tell us that we should have fun doing that. And so in that spirit, I need to show you my t-shirt. If you can read this, never trust an atom, they make up everything. Now, it's my belief that the person who first told that joke was an ancient Greek philosopher named Democritus, who in about 400 BC coined the word atomos. And if you've ever had a CT scan or ever seen a CT scan, CT stands for computed tomography. And what you're actually looking at is a multitude of slices through the brain or whatever other part of the body is being scanned. And the root word for tomography is tomos, which means cut. So you're seeing all these cuts of the human body. And Democritus put an A in front of tomos and got atomos, which in Greek means uncuttable. So this was purely a hypothesis. There was no way to experimentally test this. But the idea that matter was ultimately composed of indivisible particles, I guess you could say, that you could divide things down only to that degree, was a reasonable hypothesis compared to fire, earth, wind, and water, I guess, as major constituents of matter. And over many, many centuries, we obviously learned a lot. And without going into any detail, people like Robert Boyle, John Dalton, Lavoisier, many of these names you would know. We learned a lot about how matter interacted and how we could very willfully bring about changes that would be useful to us. And in the process of this, we discovered ways of separating what came to be called compounds into elements, and things really began to accelerate. Within the 1800s, the number of elements that we knew of went from 41 to 83. And so this was a very, very rich area for scientific discovery. And one of the people I want to mention in that is Mendeleev, who was a Ukrainian Russian who most people know developed the periodic table, but he did it by trying to look at all of the properties of these elements. And he found that many of the properties, as the weight of elements increased, they seemed to repeat. And so these periodic properties, he was able to assemble into a table. And one of the most interesting things about this was that when he assembled this table, he was very conscious of the fact that there were empty spaces in his table. And he basically challenged scientists to discover what he knew to be additional elements that had not yet been discovered. And this is about 1869. So this is just a few decades before Marie and Pierre Curie. And one of Marie Curie's cousins, Joseph Bagusta, excuse me, he actually worked under Mendeleev in Russia and was he sort of couriered correspondences between Marie Curie and Mendeleev. So on the verge of the story we're going to tell about the Curies was all of this wonderful progress that had been made was still strictly within the domain of chemistry. One of the things that was demonstrated was matter was not created or destroyed. Even if you burned a log and it seemed to disappear and just leave some powdery ash, that in fact, if you could collect all the gases that had been given off, that none of the weight of that original log had actually disappeared. Lavoisier showed that you could decompose water into hydrogen and oxygen. That took energy, it took electricity, but then you could combine those gases again, and with a little spark, you could reproduce the water that you began with. But all of this was still in the realm of chemistry. And what happened in 1895 was that, there was Röntgen who discovered some mysterious rays being given off from a cathode ray tube. And then in 1896, Henri Becquerel, who was one of Marie's professors, that he was trying to study how certain minerals fluoresced, that if you put them in sunlight or under ultraviolet light, they would glow. And there were other minerals called phosphorescence, where that glow might persist for a few seconds or perhaps even a few hours after they had been stimulated by sunlight. And that what Becquerel conducted an experiment, what he wanted to do was to show that uranium, a salt of uranium, which he believed did glow under sunlight, that he wanted to shine the sunlight on the uranium salt and see if it would expose a photographic plate which had been wrapped in heavy black paper so the sunlight wouldn't affect it. But as often happens in science, things didn't go quite as planned. It was a cloudy day, so he couldn't shine sunlight on his experiment. And it was cloudy for a few days, apparently, so he just stuck everything in the drawer with this uranium salt sitting on top of the photographic plate, which had been wrapped in black paper. And Louis Pasteur has a famous saying, chance favors the prepared mind, because when he did come back to his experiment, he had the foresight to develop that photographic plate. And if you could put up the, maybe it's our second picture. I don't think we put up the picture of Marie Curie. Yeah, this was the photographic plate. And if you look at the smudge on the lower half of the plate, he had placed it's described as a Maltese cross, in between the lump of uranium salt and the photographic plate. And you can see the outline of that on the plate when it's developed. So this indicated that you didn't have a momentary emission of energy, but there was a continuous output of something, of some form of radiation from this uranium salt, which persisted for days. Now, this was something, it was understood that some chemical reactions could release energy, like lighting a match to hydrogen and oxygen gas. But to have a continuous output of energy from something that appeared inert was a shocker. And Marie immediately seized on this as the subject of her PhD thesis, and in fact, her life's work. So that kind of sets the stage for investigating what was clearly a completely new physical principle. So with that, I'll turn it over to Denise.
Okay. First off, I want to say that you can't have creativity without passion. The two go hand in hand. That one can't exist without the other. And I have a beautiful example of that. If you put it on the screen, it's from a paper written by Lyndon LaRouche back in June of 1998. And it says, for example, contrast reason and mere logic as opponents of one another. Where is the passion in a formal deductive logic? The question itself is a contradiction in terms. Without the passion of relentlessly extended concentration, how might we discover the principle which overcomes a defiant paradox? Without the passion for truth, how would we be impelled to refuse to accept less than the recognition or the discovery of such a principle? The notion of a dispassionate search for truth is a contradiction in terms. Logic as such is morally dead, or better said, outrightly immoral, because it is amoral. It is the creative impulses governed by an overriding passion for truth. That same passion, agape, which separates the Christian from the moralizing hypocrite in 1 Corinthians 13, which are the only efficient source of truthfulness and justice. This is the passion which produces truth in the progress of physical science. This is the distinction between classical and allegedly alternative forms of art, such as popular, romantic, modernist, existentialist, and postmodernist, etc. So I think Lynn has hit it on the head. In fact, when I decided to do this work on Madame Curie, I was seized by this passion through reading this book written by her daughter, Eve Curie, entitled Madame Curie. And I was so taken by it, it really went to my heart. And when I read this paper by Lynn, it became very obvious to me that I was passionately in love with these ideas that she went through. And so I used that passion to put together this paper. So the first thing I would like to show you is, let me see here. What is it?
No,
Picture.
I think I was supposed to go again.
Oh, you are. It's your turn?
I think.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to go through a little bit of how they, within the same year, in 1898, the Curies discovered two new elements. in pursuit of trying to understand this phenomena, which she named radioactivity. And I just want to give you a quick picture of what was involved in trying to do this, because the uranium salts, as I had mentioned, were known to demonstrate this phenomenon of radioactivity. And so what Marie and Pierre, who basically dropped other work that he had been doing in order to assist Marie in this research, was they had to work through tons and tons and tons of what was called pitchblende, which contained the uranium, but they quickly found that there was something else in the pitchblende that was even more radioactive than the uranium itself. And if you show the next picture, there's a picture of their laboratory, if you can call it that. Yeah, it was basically a stable, it was a shed out in the backyard. And the apparatus on the table was something that Pierre had investigated when he was studying crystals. He had been pursuing some of the work that Pasteur had begun earlier on crystals and symmetry and things of that nature. And he invented something called a piezoelectrometer. And the basic idea is that if you have two parallel plates, which you've attached to a battery, that there won't be any current going between the two plates. However, if you place a radioactive sample on the lower plate, it would ionize the air molecules in between and allow a very small current to pass between the two plates. And basically, the piezoelectric electrometer was a device for measuring extremely low currents. And so every time they would carry out some chemical process to try to get rid of the stuff they didn't want, right? In pitchblende, there are at least 20 different elements, and most of them showed no radioactivity. So they're basically trying to get rid of everything that's not radioactive to find out what in fact it is that's responsible for this radioactivity. So every time they would do some chemical reaction, precipitate this and add some of that, and to identify whether the precipitate or the solution, whatever, was that still radioactive? And if not, they discard it. And they had to process between, this is somewhat later, but 500 to 600 tons of material to produce 1 gram of radium. And I brought a little measuring spoon from home. This is 1/8 of a teaspoon. And if you took about 1.5 of these, you would have 1 gram. So out of 500 to 600 tons of material, this is what they were able to produce. So I'll stop there and you can go on.
Okay. Let's see. I think the next picture I have is Marie Curie with her children. So Marie Curie, Pierre, and Henry Henri Becquerel won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1903. And it was the first time that physics was considered a category in the Nobel realm. And it was the first time that a woman had ever won a Nobel Prize. She shared it with Pierre and Becquerel. What happened was interesting. Becquerel and Pierre were nominated, but not Marie. And Pierre said, basically, if you don't give this award to Marie too, I'm not taking it. So the award was given to the three of them. So that's just to, set you off. She won a second Nobel Prize in 1911 for chemistry, where what she did in that in those years after Pierre's death is she worked relentlessly on trying to create metallic radium, or turn radium into a metal, I should say. So Pierre died in 1906. And this, of course, was devastating for Marie because she not only lost her science partner, but her best friend and her husband. And I have a lot here in my paper about what she had to say, but all I'm going to do is quote what Pierre always would tell her and tell everybody, really. And do you have that quote of Pierre Curie? Okay, I'll assume not. Pierre Curie used to say, "It is nevertheless hard that this life we have chosen, our society in which reigns an eager desire for riches and luxury, does not understand the value of science. It does not realize that science is the most precious part of its moral patrimony, nor does it take sufficient cognizance of the fact that science is the base of all progress that lightens the burden of life and lessens the suffering." So that was the sort of person that Pierre was. Pierre and Marie were both not only passionate about their work, they refused to accept any patents for their work. Pasteur did the same thing. People tried to say, well, this is how you're going to earn money. And what Marie and Pierre said, we're not doing this to make money. We're doing this from humanity. Do you have a picture of the Radium Institute? Yeah, no, there it is, the Radium Institute. After Pierre's death, what Marie did is she didn't convince people, but people realized how important their work was, and they created the Radium Institute, which was right next door to the Pasteur Institute. And the Pasteur Institute was basically dealing with biology, and the Radium Institute dealt with physics, radium, polonium. And I have a quote here. This was inscribed in stone on the face of the Radium Institute, and it's from Louis Pasteur. And he says, you got that quote? Okay. "If conquests useful to humanity touch your heart, if you stand amazed before the surprising effects of electric telegraphy, daguerreotype, and anesthesia, and so many other admirable discoveries, if you are jealous of the part your country can claim in the further flowering of these wonders, take an interest. I urge you, in these holy dwellings to which the expressive name of laboratories is given, ask that they may be multiplied and adorned. They are the temples of the future, of wealth and well-being. It is there that humanity grows bigger, strengthens, and betters itself. It learns there to read in the works of nature, works of progress and universal harmony, whereas its own works are too often those of barbarity, fanaticism, and destruction. So that was from Pierre, or rather Louis Pasteur, and this is what Marie chose to put on the Radium Institute, which she created. Let's see, let's go to after she won her Nobel Prize in 1911, she was viciously attacked, unwarranted attack for having an affair with a co-worker, and she was basically gone after. They actually literally threw bricks through her window and tried to destroy her. Nonetheless, Marie continued her work. And in 1914, you had the beginning of World War II. And what she did during the Second World War, she realized, First World War, I'm sorry, what she realized that there was a need for X-rays to be on the field. That when men were shot on the field, oftentimes, as was the case before X-rays, you would simply amputate that part of the body that was shattered. So, if you
Because you couldn't locate where the
bullet
or
went.
shrapnel was. Yeah.
Right. So with using radiology, you could figure it out, find where the bullet was, and extract it. So what Marie did is she told the War Department that she needed to build these, I guess you call them
Mobile X-ray machines.
trucks.
Yeah.
And she built them herself, and she got money from wealthy women. People donated their cars and money. And what she did is she literally put these things together. She learned how to fix cars, how to put together X-ray machines, and she went to the front to save the lives of men who might otherwise have died or become permanently disabled. During the first year of the First World War, there were 875,000 casualties on the French side and 675,000 casualties on the German side. So it was very necessary. That was just in the first year of World War I. What she did was very important. She brought her daughter Irene with her. Irene was her oldest daughter. Eve was her second child. Irene was only 16 years old, and she begged to go to the front. She wanted to be with her mother. So what she did is she studied a nursing course. In 6 months, she became a nurse. And during the course of the war, she earned degrees in physics, chemistry, and mathematics. I should also mention that when Marie Curie went to the Sorbonne in Paris, that she was the only woman to take physics, and she was number one in her class. And when she took mathematics, she placed second. So she was a very brilliant woman. And Pierre picked up on this and immediately fell in love with her. So anyway, I would like to go from this area to her trip to America. Now, her trip to America happened in 1921. So this is a few years after the end of the First World War. Now, it happened that there was a woman in the United States who had followed Marie Curie very closely. She was a magazine editor of a magazine called The Delineator, which was that day's Better Homes and Gardens. That's what the magazine was. But Marie Maloney was way above that. Missy Maloney, well, her first name was really Marie, but everybody called her Missy. And what Missy did is she went to Paris to see Marie and was turned away over and over and over again. And finally, Marie relented to see her. And what Missy said to Marie was, I hear you need radium. I understand that most of the radium that you have has been used up in various experiments and the creation of various things, and that you need to have more radium. And what I want to do is help you get that radium. She said, if I can convince you to come to the United States, I can raise the money to buy you 1 gram, what Roger showed you, of radium. And the cost of it was $100,000. And in today's dollars, that means 1.5, let's see, $1.6 million. Okay, so Missy went on the campaign to raise money for this. And they went to college campuses. All college girls, would throw in $1 or $2, which was a lot of money for them at the time. Children would send in, nickels and dimes, like during the March of Dimes when Jonas Salk had discovered the cure for polio. And basically, she came to the United States, and President Harding greeted her with this very long speech, to which she replied, I cannot express to you the emotion which fills my heart in this moment. You, the chief of this great republic of the U.S., honor me as no woman has ever been honored in America before. It gives me confidence in the destiny of democracy. I accept this rare gift, Mr. President, with the hope that I may serve mankind. I thank your countrywomen in the name of France. I thank them in the name of humanity, which we all wish so much to make happier. I love you all, my American friends. And that's the kind of person that Marie Curie was. And I should mention that, the base of the Statue of Liberty was built with American money, but of course the actual statue came from France. So that was a gift to the United States. And the United States' gift to France was to raise this money to give her radium, which she needed in her studies. So the next picture is just a picture of the magazine, The Delineator, which Missy Maloney wrote for and was the editor of. And as you can see, it says that millions shall not die.
I would let me just interject one thing. Not only was the study of radioactivity in terms of how X-rays could be used for medical purposes, that radium itself was an effective cure for certain types of cancer. There were all kinds of quack treatments. People were putting radium in toothpaste and facial cream and anything you could think of. So at times it was promoted as some kind of snake oil panacea. But the doctors in particular responded to this campaign because radium was effectively used to treat cancer in many, many cases.
Right. In fact, one of the champions of the Curies was a man named Dr. Robert Abbey. I think I have a picture of him that you should bring up. Dr. Abbey was a champion of Marie Curie. He was the first doctor to use radium in treatment of cancer. He was very successful. in doing that. He didn't use direct, radium on the skin, but he used radium to hold back the cancer, and was able to add to the lifetime of many people who might not have survived. So the other thing about Dr. Raby that I think that Dr. Abby did that I think Diane will like is Dr. Abby was very interested in prehistoric artifacts, and he founded a museum at a summer home on Deer Island in Bar Harbor, Maine.
Mount Desert Island, I think.
You went?
Mount Desert Island.
Mount Desert Island.
Yeah, in Bar Harbor.
In Bar Harbor, right. So, anyways, I thought she'd find that amusing. But anyways, you can go there and you can see Abby's artifacts there. When she went to the United States, one of the first things that happened is there was a crowd of 3,500 women who got together at Carnegie Hall, and they had a standing ovation applause that went on for minutes and minutes and minutes after Marie entered the room. They had a choir of Polish children who sang. They had, let's see here, I wanted to mention this. I can't seem to find it. At any rate, she visited many, many colleges, over 10. She she went to Vassar, Wellesley, Bryn Mawr, Columbia, Harvard, Yale, and many others. She was very taken by these young American students whom she loved, and they were, of course, enthralled by who she was, and were undoubtedly inspired to study science by her example. As a matter of fact, Marie Curie was the most admired woman in America in polls taken for almost a period of 10 years. She was number one, the most admired woman in the United States. Which wouldn't happen now. You'd probably have some Hollywood superstar, something like that, in that category. Now, after Marie Curie, there was an event at the American Museum of Natural History in which Dr. Michael Pupin, who was a professor of electrical mechanics at Columbia University, who was a Serbian immigrant, and his first job was a farm laborer. And he said, quote, "The knowledge of radioactivity, which she had helped to reveal, was founding a new structure of physics in which all matter is electricity and each atom a perfect system of electrons." And they also talked about the first surgeons in the United States, and that it was Dr. Abby who was the first surgeon. Now, I've taken too much time, so I'm going to...
Just go to the next picture.
Okay, next picture, please. Okay.
Yeah, there's this and the subsequent picture. At a certain point, there was an attempt to industrialize this process for refining radium. This is the cup that held the 1 gram of radium. I don't know if this was the first or second gram. She wanted to establish a radium institute in Warsaw, Poland, her home country.
In 1929.
And so there was a second campaign to raise the money for a second gram of radium. And if you go to the next picture, this is in Pittsburgh.
No, Colorado.
Oh, okay. Anyway, this shows you the scale, really developing an industrial process with these huge vats to process tons and tons and tons of ore in order to produce this tiny amount of radium. The first place that this manufacturing occurred was actually in Lackawanna, New York, and then to Pittsburgh and also Colorado.
I was going to mention it.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want me to do Glenn Seaborg and then you can go
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah, go
Makes
ahead.
sense? Okay.
Yeah.
See what the next picture is. Yeah, okay. The man in the middle is Glenn Seaborg, who was a very important American nuclear physicist who he discovered himself, I think, too. There's an element called seaborgium. I forget what the other one.
American.
I don't know. Anyway, this was 1967, which was the centennial of Marie Curie's birth. And this picture was taken in front of her home in Warsaw, Poland. And Seaborg's presentation was really a very exciting and optimistic sort of overview of the results of all of the work that Marie Curie and all of the people who followed her in the development of our understanding of what we could do with this new physical principle of radioactivity. And he describes what is essentially what Lyndon LaRouche always referred to as a nuplex, that you could use a nuclear power plant, which is based on fission, on the decay of radioactive elements, uranium, there are others that can be used for this, which releases energy in various forms. And that he described how you could desalinate seawater. I don't know, actually, I think we may have a picture of this also. Yeah. This is a picture which this was a design from the 1960s. He's speaking in 1967, that the nuclear power plant could produce electricity, obviously. It could desalinate seawater. You could use it to produce ammonia and phosphorus for fertilizers. And he describes using these to create food factories. And he gives some figures. He says one such plant could produce enough fresh water and fertilizer to irrigate and fertilize 200,000 acres, which would produce 1 billion pounds of grain, which could support 2.5 million people. Plus, it could export additional fertilizer to support millions of more people. And then he describes how this could be used to help build ports, the fishing industry, irradiate food, and he describes to eliminate pests, save trees by developing new metals, polymers, plastics, eliminate junk and waste through nuclear-powered reprocessing, control and predict the weather, reach planets and other stars, better ways to develop nuclear medicine, ways to develop vaccines, and even he talks about the idea of radioisotopes, which could power heart pumps to save lives. So, there's a common, if you Google Marie Curie, one of the first things you often see is, well, she died from leukemia. So, she was really a victim of the nuclear age, which is complete BS. She did have leukemia. She definitely did suffer from exposure to radiation, but she was very clear that she had a finite time on Earth. She had an opportunity to make immortal contributions to the betterment of mankind. And what better way to spend one's life? And what Seaborg describes is that while we haven't utilized the technologies that we have developed to the extent that we could or should, but that this is the potential. This is the fruits of an idea. This is the fruits of an insight into how the physical universe acts, how to see within the atom. And this, when Curie is beginning her research, we didn't know what an electron was, a proton, a neutron. There was no understanding of isotopes. That all had to come in the course of these investigations and experiments. But what more can you say? I think Einstein might have something to say.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Albert Einstein was a good friend of Marie, and they often went hiking with each other in the nearby Alps, and they were very close. There's a lot of letters between them. I won't go through, but when she passed away in I think it was 1934, there was a eulogy by Einstein that I wanted to read because it's so beautiful. How much Einstein thought of her. Do you have that? Yes. What an outstanding person such as Madame Curie has completed in her life's course. We should remember what she gave as the fruit of her work to humanity, because the ethical qualities of leading personalities of a generation are of greater importance for the generation and for posterity than the purely intellectual accomplishments. And these latter are to a higher degree dependent, more than one usually thinks, on the greatness of character. I had the good fortune to be connected with Madame Curie through a beautiful and unclouded friendship of 20 years, during which I learned to know and admire her human greatness in an ever-increasing degree. She had a strong and definite will, possessing a sternness towards herself, with an objectivity which made it impossible for any prejudice to influence her decision. These qualities are seldom combined in human beings. At all times, she was aware of being a servant to humanity, her deep modesty never allowing her to be self-satisfied. She was ever alive to the harshness and injustice of society, towards which she expressed herself through an outward coldness which might have been easily misunderstood by others, and with specific sternness was not to be softened through any pretense. When she knew the path to be right, she would follow it without compromise and with the utmost determination. The greatest scientific achievements of her life, the proof of the existence and isolation of radioactive elements, was not due to a daring intuition, but also a devotion and determination of the accomplishment under the most unheard of difficulties, which have seldom been encountered in the history of experimental science. If only a small part of Madame Curie's greatness of character and devotion would be alive in the intellectual circles of Europe today, the destiny of Europe would be a better one. So I think.
Well, you had the last picture of Marie.
I have the last picture of Marie.
Wasn't there There's something else, or was that it?
Yeah, but I don't have to do
Okay.
that. And as Marie Curie would say, nothing is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Marie Curie died at the age of 67. Thank you.
Well, thank you both very much. You know, I was in the Robert Abbey Museum many times as a child.
Oh.
As soon as you said his name, I said, oh, could that have been the founder of the Abbey Museum that I visited so many times in my childhood? And of course, my mother, who was a biochemist, had given me many years ago Eve Curie's biography of her mother, which I found also completely engrossing. The passion and the hardship she suffered. If I remember correctly, she nearly starved to death as a student. She was so poor and she had long illnesses because of her lack of ability to even eat, which also I think underscored her dedication. And her relationship with her husband was one of the most amazing, tender collaborations. I remember the way the daughter described it, and talk about passion. I think it was in everything that she touched and did.
Yeah.
Pierre had said that he had pretty much given up on finding a wife because it was so rare that you could find an intellect that you could really work with. So, and especially among women, because we didn't really talk about this, but women were excluded from lectures, particularly in the sciences. They were supposed to be at home raising kids. And so she was an incredible trailblazer in that regard. And when Pierre saw that, he said, she's the one.
I might add just one thing that I'd like to say is when Pierre died in 1906, Marie was asked to become a professor and take his place at the Sorbonne. And the first day she walked in there was thunderous applause, and they expected her to break down and cry, and she didn't. What she did is she immediately picked up from the passage that he had left off on and continued where he would have gone. So,
really amazing. I also think what Einstein said about Europe in 1935 could apply just as well to today, in a sense. Here we are on the 80th anniversary of the defeat of fascism, and Europe has gone completely mad, wanting to back Ukraine in a losing war against Russia. And clearly this lack of an ethical quality that Einstein spoke about. You know, the greatest of scientists and artists really do not do what they do for money. I was thinking of even Dr. Edward Teller, who was involved in the Manhattan Project and was a crusty, argumentative Hungarian, as Lynn would describe him, was very clear that the discoveries they made in nuclear science should be the property of mankind. I think he thought that perhaps during a time of war, you might not share everything, but ultimately everything. I mean, who owns the principle of gravity? Who owns a discovery of how cells work, or the question of the atoms, which is a whole other fascinating thing? Because I have to say, Roger, when you said that they didn't know about protons, neutrons, and electrons, you know, it hadn't occurred to me that that would be the case. Of course, it was the case. And that's a really challenging conception of how do you arrive at a hypothesis which has served us very well so far on workings of the atom.
Yeah, the conception, Democritus, the idea that you have these little hard balls that are atoms that can't be divided, it really wasn't much different than that up into the 1800s. They knew a lot more about how they could interact and how we could manipulate them, but they still seem to be these impenetrable little units, little atoms. So to discover that there was some phenomena going on inside the atom was truly a revolution, and then everybody could jump on it and try to understand the different kinds of radiation or particles that were being emitted, and from that gain a better understanding of the so-called subatomic particles.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think it's a beautiful irony that many uneducated people and many women who have not been educated in science and technology are afraid of nuclear energy. And it was a woman who opened the door to the whole nuclear age. And people don't know that. People don't even know the name Marie Curie today
Right.
in school. It's not taught. So, we have to bring this back. We have to bring this back. I mean, the idea that was stated at the outset, Diane, about how we have to get our children away from the screens and the video games and so forth, and have them read. I mean, it's my hope that people who are watching this, mothers, grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, and uncles, will read Eve Curie's book to their children and be as thrilled as I was when I first read it.
I mean, Lynn used to talk about reliving great discoveries. So what better way to stimulate those creative and intellectual abilities in a child than to try to relive the lives or to experience the lives of people who made our lives possible. So,
Right, exactly. Well, thank you very much. Is there anything more that you would like to add, either of you?
Read LaRouche, read him on passion, read it with a passion. And also, we're going to have a conference coming up on May the 24th and 25th. It's sponsored by the Schiller Institute. And this conference, a 2-day conference, it's in person. I urge people to register for it and to go to it. And we'll have a lot of science there and a lot of music. By the way, Marie's other daughter, who I didn't mention, Eve Curie, who lived, by the way, to be 102, was a classical pianist. And Marie Curie said of her that she played with the emotion of a grown adult. So, I mean, in her family, Irene, she won a Nobel Prize in 1935, for artificial radiation, along with her husband, Frederick Joliot. And her other daughter, Eve, was a classical pianist. So the idea of art and science being together is exemplified, through the Curies and also through what we're doing and what we're going to do on the 24th and the 25th in the New York area. So I would urge you to find out about this and come to our conference or be on live via Zoom to our conference. And if you haven't already, I would urge people to go ahead and read the EIR Daily Alert. It's $10 a month. It comes out every day. And you can keep up on the international news and the latest scientific developments. So, with that.
Thank you. You took the words out of my mouth. I would like to add on the conference, which is the Saturday and Sunday, May 24th and 25th of Memorial Day weekend, we are putting great emphasis on inviting young people. That is, by young, I mean in your 20s. We are in an epochal change right now. It is the end of a dying system, that is for sure. And there will be a new system established, hopefully like that Lyndon and Helga LaRouche had fought for many years. And like you see with this BRICS plus dynamic of nations working on their common interest, which really is what John Quincy Adams expressed perhaps the most clearly of Americans other than Lyndon LaRouche later, but it was the hallmark of all great American presidents, of whom there have been too few. And so if you are a young person today, your life and your work can make a greater impact than almost any young person before you, because what happens in the coming months is going to determine the fate of mankind for millennia ahead, truly. So I really wanted to encourage that. And the $10 a month to the LaRouche organization allows you to get the daily alert. So thank you, Denise and Roger. It's been a pleasure having both of you here, old friends from days of New Hampshire campaigns and the marriage of Diane and Chris Sayre as well.
That's
So
right.
That's right.
so much,
That's
and
right.
we'll see everybody soon.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.